Well, hello, good evening, and welcome to episode 65 of Fracking Nightmare. So we're back after the UK Column Studios. We're on their summer break. So this is the first show for 3 weeks. Now, right up until the studios closed, we were anticipating the UK government announcing the 14th round of licenses. And sure enough, no sooner had the studio shut and the 14th round was announced. Now, we're not going to go into a great deal of detail tonight on the 14th round because we've got something that is extremely important to talk about, and that's very much related to underground coal gasification in Scotland. But of course, it's not just Scotland. It's much of the UK coastline as well. But the 14th round, a lot of people have been contacting me saying that they're having difficulty getting hold of the information, getting the links to the maps. And there's no question that DEC haven't exactly made it a one-click journey. So as of hopefully tomorrow, that'll be Tuesday, the maps, the link to the PDF of the 158 maps that DEC have released for the 14th round will be available as a download on frackingnightmare.com. Now, we're also working on a database, and my thanks to Adela Pickles for her outstanding and tenacity in pulling together the listing of all of the communities that are going to be affected by the 14th round. Now, we're going to put that into a database, an Excel spreadsheet, so that hopefully people will be able to find very quickly whether they are in the new sacrifice zones. So, there's no question that the British government has effectively announced an environmental war on the people of the north of England, and particularly Yorkshire. So there are now licenses pretty much right across Yorkshire. In fact, one of the observations that I make is that particularly North and East Yorkshire is the largest landmass in the UK that has the fewest number of MPs. There's just 4 Conservative MPs covering this area. And as we've discussed previously on Fracking Nightmare, the perverse philosophy of DEC and the Tory government is that their Tory-held constituents will simply put up the best fight they can until such time as basically it's all signed off, rubber stamped, and then they'll throw up their hands and say, oh, well, we tried, and the trucks will simply roll in. Boy, have they got something coming to them. And I don't mean the community. The industry is going to find that the level of awareness against this abomination is at such a level that people are simply not going to sit back and let the trucks roll into town. So actually, you know what? I want to thank Amber Rudd and David Cameron for absolutely gifting the anti-fracking community with the best possible recruitment tool that we could have ever had. And by the end of the year, I confidently predict that the number of anti-fracking groups around the country will be in excess of 500. But more of that later on. Now, Scotland. Let's have a look at Scotland. Here's the map. And what you can see there is the area of Scotland that was up for grabs in the 14th round. Now, from the previous rounds, you can see in the middle of the map there, that's the area that was licensed. This is literally from the northeastern corner of Glasgow, pretty much right up to northwest of Edinburgh. But of course, this doesn't show the whole picture because there were also underground coal gasification licenses. And those licenses primarily are in the Firth of the Forth here. Now, in the announcements a couple of weeks ago, there were no mention of any new licenses in this area because they, of course, now fall under the remit of the Scottish Parliament. Interestingly, though, a company called INEOS made its debut with some bids for blocks south of the border. And, of course, INEOS is working very much hand in glove with iGas. And regular viewers of Fracking Nightmare will be very familiar with iGas. But underground coal gasification, there's a particular campaigner in Scotland who has attracted similar attention to that of Vera Scroggins in Pennsylvania. And this is from the Herald in Scotland a little over a year ago, in fact, May of last year. And here was the headline: coal gas company accused of bullying environmental campaigner with legal gag. Now, I just want to share some of that article with you. A coal gas company involving the UK's biggest private landowner, the Duke of Buccleuch, I probably haven't pronounced that correctly, has been accused of bullying after it slapped a legal gag on a lone environmental campaigner. Lawyers acting for Five Quarter, a Newcastle-based firm that wants to exploit gas in undersea coal seams, have threatened to sue an Ayrshire business analyst for malicious falsehood. Scottish peer Buccleuch has an 8% stake in the company and has a director on its board. So who was that campaigner? Mel Kelly wrote a 42-page report entitled The Theft of Austerity, Britain's Coal, on what she sees as the danger of underground coal gasification. It criticises Five Quarters, its director, and other firms, and has been circulated to politicians and the media. On May the 8th, this is of last year, she got an email from Newcastle law firm Muckle telling her to cease and desist, distributing her report to avoid costly legal action. Such gagging has been termed a slap, a strategic lawsuit against public participation. Muckle told Kelly to remove any reference to her report from any publications and provide contact details for the report's recipients with confirmation in 48 hours that this would be done. If this confirmation is not received, our client reserves the right to issue proceedings against you seeking relief for defamation and or malicious falsehood, the email said, adding, our client would also be seeking to recover legal costs and interest. Such costs could be substantial. Kelly's allegations were untrue and likely to cause serious harm to the reputation of Five Quarter, Muckle said. The risks she highlighted were isolated incidents and do not involve Five Quarter. Kelly from Irving has asked Muckle for more time to respond, but called the email a heavy-handed attempt to intimidate me. She said, I will continue campaigning to raise awareness of underground coal gasification, which will likely prove to be just as controversial as fracking, once the public and legislators become fully aware of the many possible consequences for our health, wealth and environment. Well, I am delighted to welcome as my guest this evening the recipient of that cease and desist order, Mel Kelly from Ayrshire in Scotland. Good evening, Mel.
Good evening.
Hey, well, it's an absolute pleasure to be able to welcome you to Fracking Nightmare, and call it a hunch, I'd say you touched a nerve.
It appears I have. I didn't hear anything more after Greenpeace, the Herald and many other organisations stepped in to highlight this attempt at a legal threat to basically attempt to silence me.
I mean, it is an absolute classic case of corporate bullying, and you know, I'm a victim myself, obviously, because I am sitting on a bill apparently for about £37,000, which a company called Rathlin Energy are trying to recover from me, because I had the audacity to challenge their attempt to evict the camp at Crawberry Hill last August. And of course, the corporations absolutely rely on the fact that they can intimidate people, because no individual they believe, will put up everything they potentially own against the might of the corporations. And so this is how they just basically steamroller over the population.
Yes, they can try, but the population is not going to stand for that.
Fantastic. Well, and hopefully your example will inspire others to get involved and also to understand the magnitude of what's occurring here. And that, of course, is what we're going to discuss tonight. So, first of all, can you just give us a little bit of background as to, what got you motivated to get involved in the issue of underground coal gasification? Because you're living in Ayrshire, and Ayrshire isn't, as yet anyway, threatened by the potential for underground coal gasification exploitation.
That's correct. Basically, I read a report on BBC in 2013 saying people in Warwickshire were up in arms because a company called Clough Natural Resources intended to undertake underground coal gasification as a British first there. So I decided to research it and published 2 articles in Open Democracy because I was totally shocked by my early findings. But I continued researching and realised the information available was so shocking that 900-word articles weren't enough. So I offered to create a report for the campaign group No UCG Works, and so that they could share this with local communities to give them the information they needed to understand all the events from the trials worldwide, because underground coal gasification has absolutely no commercial operations in the world. So unlike fracking, which is tried and tested and proven to have various problems, even small tiny trials of underground coal gasification are causing horrendous environmental damage. So I put the report together, sent it to the people of Warwickshire, and the people shared the report, and as people became informed, Clough Natural Resources completely cancelled the trial and backed off.
Well, let's just have a look at, I've got this map here, and this was, in fact, the only land-based license for underground coal gasification in the UK. All of the other licenses are under river estuaries or actually of coastal areas. But this, of course, is literally right in the heart of the West Midlands. I mean, as you can see, here's Coventry. So it is literally just to the southeast of the city of Coventry there. And although much of the area is agricultural, nonetheless, it's literally just a few miles there. So this was because, I mean, this actually was kept out of much of the mainstream media. Very, very few people are aware, even in the anti-fracking community in the UK, very few people are aware that this was actually one of the very first successes in running one of the companies out of town. And this is very much attributable, of course, to yourself and to the community group. And, you know, one of the points that we stress on Fracking Nightmare is that the great strength of the anti-fracking community in the UK is that there is no national organisation, there is no national structure, but there is a growing number of community groups who are all focusing on, in most cases, their local area and running these industries ragged with their objections. So this was a tremendous success.
It was for the people in Warwickshire and all the various groups under the banner No UCG Works, and it just proved when people are armed with the information that they are needed to make informed choices, that the people stood up and said no. And as you say, so little is known about underground coal gasification. That's why I started sending the report not only to these community groups in the licence areas, but to MPs, MSPs and councillors. And that is when I received the legal threat, because it appears in this country that these companies, who, by the way, have absolutely no underground coal gasification experience, think that we have no right to actually supply information to our own elected representatives about unknown technologies, which information they require, which the Scottish Parliament and the Westminster Parliament are refusing to supply.
Well, this is why, as I said in my opening remarks, in many ways, this is a wonderful gift, because what it's doing is it's actually giving an education to people from right across the UK, and it's actually showing them what can be achieved once they engage in the process and actually start scrutinising, one, what's going on with their local elected representatives, and then, of course, what's going on with their national elected representatives. And one of the things that the political class do not like is scrutiny.
I would totally agree with that. And basically, because we've got new MPs, I made a point of sending my initial report to all the new Scottish MPs to bring them up to speed with the dangers of what underground coal gasification pose for Scotland, who the SNP leadership and the Westminster Parliament have decided are now to be the guinea pig for the whole world. Because up to now, all UCG trials have been land-based, they've been onshore, they have all failed, they're all contaminating groundwater, they're causing underground explosions, subsidence. And what's proposed for Scotland by Westminster is a perfect storm where the licences issued for coal bed methane, fracking and underground coal gasification are all in the same place at the same time. Now, does it make sense to you to burn billions of tonnes of coal underground instead of safely in power stations in the same place that you intend fracking and extracting coal bed methane? So here we have a perfect storm of fractures underground where methane can seep from fracking and coal bed methane operations into an underground coal fire that nobody can control. And there you have the perfect storm of a perfect explosion in a densely populated area.
And in terms of disaster capitalism, of course, somebody stands to make an absolute fortune from attempting to deal with the problem once it's been created. And, of course, coincidentally, just 3 weeks ago, we had the report released in Australia, and in fact, it was released on the morning of the last episode of Fracking Nightmare. And so we were able to show the news report that had been broadcast in Australia earlier that morning of the horrendous damage that had been caused by Link Energy at their underground coal gasification trial, because that's what it was, just south of Chinchilla. So for those people who don't know what underground coal gasification is, here we've got a graphic here. So Mel, do you want to talk us through this?
Yes, basically what happens is they will build onshore surface plant and then start drilling horizontally and then using fracking type drilling techniques to then drill vertically to reach coal seams underground. In this case, they propose to do it underwater, something that has never been tried anywhere in the world. Now, is this so that there is no way to monitor what's going on? Because when you do that, it proves it's absolutely disastrous. So nowhere in the world has used this technology underwater. No one's tried UCG underwater, but that's what's proposed for Scotland. So they propose drilling down, drilling just off the shoreline into coal seams that connect to the mainland and setting them on fire underground. And what they tell you is now Clough Natural Resources completely misled the people of Fife. He said that no water would be used, when in fact he tells his investors that you pump down water and steam as the components to keep the coal fires burning. And bear in mind at the same time you're going to have fracking activities going on by INEOS at the same time, and INEOS incidentally wants to take the gas that's generated from this coal so that they can use it as chemical feed. But what Westminster and the Scottish Parliament don't tell the nation is they're going to burn trillions of tonnes of coal in the UK and not capture a single part of the CO2. Because if INEOS takes this gas as feedstock, which is the plan, then there's a loophole in place to say that Clough Natural Resources don't have to capture any of the CO2. Now, according to 5 Quarters directors, the people that tried to sue me, they state that there's a 2-degree temperature increase globally for every trillion tonnes of CO2 that escape into the atmosphere. The plans for the UK alone in underground coal gasification is to burn 4 trillion tonnes of coal underground without capturing CO2. That will cause 12 trillion tonnes of CO2 arisings into the atmosphere, which will increase global temperatures by 24 degrees, when the world has stated the maximum temperature rise that the world can tolerate is 2. So in the UK alone, the UCG energy strategy puts the entire climate of the whole planet at risk.
Well, and when you start talking in terms like that, you are literally talking in terms of terraforming. You are literally talking in terms of changing the ecology of this planet to the point where it would nigh on become uninhabitable, or certainly uninhabitable by life as we know it. So there's certainly an absurdity here. And of course, the other great irony is that the industry believes that it can control the fires. Now, of course, it hasn't anywhere yet. And I made this observation in the last edition of Fracking Nightmare, because far be it for me to suggest that fire has any kind of sentience, but it does seem that fire knows what it needs to survive and indeed to thrive. And of course, one of the things it needs, one of the prime components, is oxygen. And the industry believes that it can cut the fires simply by starving it of oxygen. And yet the evidence would suggest that the fires have remarkable means of establishing their own sources of oxygen to keep themselves burning.
That's basically true. I mean, we have Centralia in Washington, where the whole town's been abandoned because they have still not found a way to stop the coal fires burning. You have Link Energy, who claim before they fled the country, they said that they were shutting down their UCG trial because the government wasn't giving them a fair go.
That's 14 years, wasn't it? 14 years, it wasn't that they were there.
And now we find in March this year that it's announced it looks like this coal fire might have been abandoned and it's still burning because there are toxic gases, hydrogen sulfide, carbon monoxide and hydrogen at explosives levels just below the surface. They've put a exclusion zone of 300 miles or square kilometres where farmers aren't allowed to excavate the soil. Now the company claimed that they were moving because the government wasn't playing fair, when in fact what they didn't tell you was the government had got warrants to raid their offices weeks earlier because tip-offs from workers told them that the trial had fractured cavity all the way to the surface, something we're told will never happen. All the gas is escaping. Workers have been exposed to toxic gases. There's so much contamination that the lab that's meant to test the samples from this site refused to accept them because they're too toxic. When government inspectors came on site, workers were told to turn down the pressure to stop the government inspectors seeing the gas escape. Now, this trial looks likely to have caused the biggest environmental disaster in a continent's history. And with a 300-kilometre exclusion zone, the Scottish Parliament allows Clough Natural Resources to run a narrative that says that UCG poses negligible risk.
Well, let's have a look at the UCG licenses in Scotland. Here they are. Okay, yes. That's the ones here, and sort of Clough Natural Resources. And because this is a private company headed up by Algie Clough. And this license over here. And then we have Thornton New Energy, Riverside Energy having these two licenses to the south side. And of course, this is literally off the coast of the northeastern coast of Edinburgh.
Yep, it's basically the proposal for Clough is basically in a densely populated area, as are all the other licenses. So basically what they propose is a company with absolutely no UCG experience intends to use totally unproven technology to attempt to burn billions of tons of coal under the Firth of Forth in a densely populated area, despite the fact that the flagship trial in Australia that was claimed was the Eureka moment is now stands accused of causing the biggest environmental disaster in Australia's history.
Right, so here we have the slide. This is, anyone wanting to see a little bit more on this, just go back to the previous episode of Fracking Nightmare. And you'll see the video exposing the magnitude of this contamination. And in fact, we actually showed that video before talking with Paul Hickson, the Shropshire organic farmer, that realises now that he had a very, very lucky escape by having a clause in his contract that gave him the opportunity to terminate his contract with iGas, of course, partner with INEOS, earlier in the year, just a couple of months ago. There's 320 square kilometres in southern Queensland, where the population density is less than 1/100th of that of the UK. This is the area that's been damaged. If we transpose that into Scotland, that's a pretty... Now, this is the Western licence in the Forth. I mean, this is a pretty massive area there that would be impacted.
Yes, and it's densely populated. And basically what you've got is a plan that says, let's try doing what they did in Australia, but let's let a company do it that has absolutely no new UCG experience. Only he has got friends in Parliament. He used to raise funds for the Tory party. He stood as a Tory party candidate. He even said on his website, when he set up the company, that he will benefit from having those friends in Parliament. And he really has, because the government has chosen to give a man with no UCG experience. They've transferred 100% rights and interest to billions of tonnes of the nation's coal reserves to this man. And he proposes, while he tells Scotland there's negligible risk, he proposes just to set this coal underground on fire without any experience, sit on billions of pounds worth of coal while he does his toxic experiments on guinea pigs in Scotland.
And call it a hunch, but I'd say he doesn't actually live in this area.
Oh, I'm not sure where Algie Clough lives. I mean, he's been living in Africa for years. He strolled into the country, set up a company, and lo and behold, he magically now owns half the coal in the country. And he wants to set it on fire in Scotland. And
the other licence here, I mean, again, this is just one part of it. But I mean, if all of that, if all of those coal seams under the Firth of the Forth there were set alight, I mean, it's not a question of if, it's a question of when. I mean, basically, the link experiment in Australia, I believe I'm right in saying it actually has been an experiment for some 14 years.
Yeah.
And obviously Link Energy have known about the problem for a lot longer than that. And actually what they've really been doing is desperately trying to contain the problem. But now, of course, it's all out in the open. Imagine that in Scotland. I mean, basically, it would effectively make the whole of the eastern part of central Scotland uninhabitable.
Yes, and that's without including the fact that they intend fracking all around the same area, and you've got all these old coal mines in that area with all these fractures. Now, the Firth of Forth, Kincardine area that they plan to do this, the feasibility study conducted by the Westminster Parliament actually states that the Kincardine area is unsuitable for this trial. It's also been ruled that a test was done, should we store CO2 under the Firth of Forth? And it came back that the geology of the area is too complex to be able to store CO2 gas underground. So if it's not capable of storing and keeping CO2 underground, then what chance has it got of keeping down and stopping the area being polluted by hydrogen sulfide, hydrogen and carbon monoxide on a massive scale? Now, CO2 is 35% of the output. So look at all that dangerous toxic gas mixing in with a coal fire, along with the methane coming along fractures from the fracking process, from the coal bed methane process, from all those old mine shafts. And that's how complex the geology of the area is. That's before you add all those people going to be exposed to toxic gases by a man that's a complete novice in UCG.
Well, I might come up with another term for him other than novice. Might be somewhat less complimentary. Let's just have a look at these other licenses, though, as well, because this is the area Here's the underground coal gasification licenses that we've just been talking about, and this other one over here to the west. And this one in particular, as you can see, it is literally right in the heart of the area here. And this, of course, was Dart Energy. It's now iGas stroke INEOS. And of course, the INEOS plants are all at Falkirk. And as you say, Jim Ratcliffe's intention is to use as much of this gas as he can abstract for feedstock for the chemical plants.
Yes, basically, I spoke with an INEOS executive at one of the meetings on fracking, and I did put to him, I found it very strange when he said at the meeting they knew very little about underground coal gasification, when in fact it's well known that INEOS intends taking the syngas from all those UCG licenses from Riverside Energy, Clough Natural Resources, because they all benefit. Because, as I say, if INEOS takes the gas and uses it in Grangemouth, then none of the CO2 needs to be captured. So Clough Natural Resources, instead of having to spend billions of pounds trying to develop carbon capture and storage, which isn't there yet, then he can just release all that carbon dioxide into the atmosphere by doing a deal with INEOS. Now, has INEOS taken these UCG licenses, these fracking licenses, to stop people fracking in this area? Because he knows he can get more gas from underground coal gasification because no fracking license guarantees any gas whatsoever.
Well, we'll talk a little bit more about INEOS when we come back. We'll just take a short break, and then we'll continue the discussion with Mel Kelly, and we'll be focusing on INEOS and Jim Ratcliffe.
The Alternative View Conference. The AV6 DVD collection. Enjoy 13 fantastic presentations on 12 discs from some of the best researchers in their fields.
What a weekend, hey? What a weekend, what a range of speakers, what a hard bunch of acts to follow, really. I've heard some of the most important information here today, really, because honestly, I've spoken at a lot of gigs, and I'd say this is the best gig that I've spoken at.
These unique presentations are essential viewing for all those who have the eyes to see, the ears to hear, and who are now ready to participate in bringing about the changes that we all know we need to see. AV6. 12 discs in 2 volumes. Order now from ukcolumn.org. AV Events, taking positive activism to the next level.
Welcome back to part 2 of Fracking Nightmare. I'm talking this evening with Mel Kelly, who was served a cease and desist order by 5 Quarters, one of the companies that's seeking to initiate underground coal gasification in the UK, a method of unconventional gas exploitation that has proven to be an absolute nightmare and a disaster wherever trials have been tried in the world. Yet Scotland and much of the coastline of the UK is being set up to become the guinea pigs for this industry. Now, INEOS, we were talking about INEOS. Now, INEOS actually have a whole bunch of exhibitions, 18 exhibitions around Scotland, starting next Monday. And I'm going to bring up the details of that so that when this goes out on YouTube, people will be able to click on pause and take note of where these exhibitions are. So this is 18 fracking exhibitions for Scotland, where INEOS are going to make an effort to convince the local population that they have absolutely nothing to worry about, that they've got it all in hand and it's as safe as houses. Of course, what you will never ever hear anyone from INEOS or any of these other companies say is, listen, don't take our word for it, go away, do your own research, and what you're going to find is that it's all safe, it's all hunky-dory, and there's nothing to worry about. You will never ever hear them say that, because they know very well that the moment that anybody spends even 30 seconds looking at this, then they will quickly realize that they actually need to spend a little bit longer looking at it, because the evidence that is in the public domain is that this is a utter abomination. In fact, I refer to underground coal gasification as fracking's ugly sister. So let's have a look at where those exhibitions are. So I'm just going to pull this up on screen. And so it starts in Kincardine Community Centre next Monday, Monday the 7th. Every one of these exhibitions runs from 3 p.m. to 8 p.m. and it runs right through until the 9th of December. So if when you're looking at this on YouTube and you're looking at any of these locations and they're near you, please do go along. But just do a little bit of research for yourself first into coal bed methane extraction and underground coal gasification. And, have a few questions to ask the primarily PR personnel, because what they tend to do with these exhibitions is they don't put their engineering personnel in front of the public unless they're very senior, because they are concerned that the engineering personnel may well actually realize that what they're doing is fundamentally unsafe and not least antisocial. Whereas the PR personnel, well, they're just, with all due respect, actually none, they're just whores. They are absolute whores to the industry. That's all you can say. They have not the first clue about the technology. They simply trot out the scripts that are presented to them by the industry. Would you basically agree with that, Mel? I'm not asking you to necessarily agree with my terminology.
Yes, basically, you attend these meetings and basically you ask questions and are given no answers.
Yeah, you're fobbed off. And most of the time, of course, it's because the PR personnel who are fronting the exhibition don't know the answers. So the only thing they can do is blag. Or of course, they come out with the classic is, we'll get back to you on that. And of course, you never hear any more. But, hey, nonetheless, I think these exhibitions are a great idea, because what it means is that the anti-fracking community and the anti-underground coal gasification community can get outside these events and, share their own insights and research with the people who are coming along to these events. So thanks very much, INEOS, for telling us where you're going to be. Because I'm sure that you'll have a reception committee at pretty much every one of those events. Now, there's a couple of other opportunities to show your discomfort with this agenda. And here's an event, and this is specifically related to fighting the underground coal gasification agenda, which, of course, is not included in the current moratorium that Nicola Sturgeon has put in place in Scotland. So this is an event called Hands Over Our Forth. And the detail of this event can be found on the website, www.ourforth.org. And I'll just read you what's on the bottom there. It says, your support is needed on the Forth Road Bridge on Sunday the 11th of October at 2 p.m, joining hands across the entire bridge span, calling for an immediate ban on all unconventional gas exploitation in Scotland. It's a family event organised by and for Scottish communities. So please bring your family, friends and neighbours. And I can't emphasise this enough. It is communities. It's communities coming together like never before. People from right across the social, the political, the philosophical spectrum, all realising that this is a fundamental attack on our environmental well-being, and not least an attack on the absolute life force of the country, our water, our soil and our air. So Mel, I have to be very careful about saying where I'm going to be, because Rathlin Energy take the opportunity to have bailiffs turn up and serve papers on me. Well, it's good luck with that, guys. I'm waiting to go to court so that I can share with a wider audience the travesty that is Rathlin Energy, and for the record, discuss the environmental breaches that they have caused, and not least, of course, the damage to property that they've caused in East Yorkshire, which they're managing to effectively keep out of the mainstream media for the time being. So anyway, it's a long time since I've been over the Forth Bridge, so maybe that's an opportunity to come back north. Will you be there, Mel?
Most definitely. I think it's interesting you show that picture, because when you compare that to the proposed trial in Kincardine, that obviously has the feasibility study said was unsuitable, it takes me to Clough Natural Resources wrote to MPs and MSPs in Scotland just this month, stating, look, UCG shouldn't be included in the moratorium because the DTI paid for a part-funded EU trial and that proved everything was wonderful. When in fact, slide 31 of a DTI, of a presentation, actually states the DTI trial in Spain on underground coal gasification ended in disaster, where an underground explosion was caused because a pipe got blocked. There is absolutely no way to unblock it. It resulted in the whole thing exploding and the whole area being covered in contaminants. And this is what they propose for the Forth Road Bridge. So an underground explosion right next to one of the busiest commuter route bridges in Scotland. Subsidence, that's why we don't think this is a good idea, and that's why we are doing hands over our Forth, because we can't afford underground explosions setting off the methane that's getting fracked to explode right next to a chemical plant and the brand new container port to bring in methane from America. I mean, we are talking, when you look at the explosion in China, we are talking, take that and multiply that 100-fold when you put coal bed methane, underground coal gasification, fracking, a container port for methane, and a chemical plant in a tiny area that is densely populated. I mean, it is sheer madness.
One actually has to question the sanity of those who, I mean, far be it for me to suggest that our politicians are mentally ill, but they certainly are, how should I say, displaying behaviours that you would perhaps otherwise associate with people that have lost all touch with reality. I mean, they might as well be promoting the idea of sticking a hydrogen bomb under the Forth and seeing whether it explodes.
Well, basically, Fergus Ewing, the Scottish Energy Minister, claims he's taking an evidence-based approach. Now, from where I'm standing, his approach appears to be, let's ignore all the scientific evidence of all the trials that have all been disastrous, and let's just roll it out in Scotland along with fracking and coal bed methane, because Scotland are guinea pigs, and the SNP, who claim they will protect Scotland, are saying to the Westminster Tories, use Scotland for your toxic experiments because the SNP don't care.
Okay, now listen, I'm going to share an insight here that I know may not make me very popular with some people in Scotland, because I absolutely appreciate and understand the political euphoria that is currently prevalent in Scotland. I mean, Scotland was totally stitched up with the independence referendum. It's my opinion that referendum was totally rigged. And in fact, the results of the May elections would go some way to support that observation. Because how do you go from 6 months ago, where allegedly, nearly a year ago, on September the 18th last year, where allegedly a majority of people wanted to remain part of the union, to May of this year, when the election results clearly demonstrated that apart from 3 constituencies, the rest of Scotland effectively voted for independence. So I understand the euphoria, and I absolutely was very much supportive of Scotland becoming independent. And in fact, the episodes of Humanity versus Insanity that I did in the run-up to the election will show that to be the case. But now I have some concerns. Let's just take a look at what occurred on January the 28th of this year. And on January the 28th, Nicola Sturgeon, For those who haven't seen her before, she's the one on the right. Nicola Sturgeon, the leader of the Scottish Parliament, announced that there would be a moratorium on unconventional gas exploitation in Scotland, although it didn't include underground coal gasification. Now, on the morning of the 28th of January, she met with Jim Ratcliffe, the CEO of INEOS. Now, let's just put a few things in perspective here. She met with Jim Ratcliffe, CEO of INEOS, on the morning that she announced that there was going to be a moratorium on unconventional gas, despite the fact that she knew very well that Jim Ratcliffe and INEOS had stated his absolute intent to get into the exploitation of unconventional gas to feed his plants at Falkirk. Now, with a moratorium in place, it begs the question, why are INEOS looking to hold 18 exhibitions? There's a moratorium in place, and that moratorium is supposedly an indefinite moratorium. Now, call it a hunch. Call it a hunch. I am going to just sort of cast some aspersion here. Consider the possibility that the conversation that Nicola Sturgeon had with Jim Ratcliffe, who has already promised communities 6% of revenues achieved from the exploitation. Well, if he's going to take the gas for himself, then basically there's not going to be very much in the way of revenue per se. And what revenue, that it would be a nominal revenue. So communities aren't going to get very much from that anyway. So 6% is of not very much is not very much anyway. But consider the possibility that the conversation went like this. Jim, I know you've been very, very supportive towards the Scottish Nationalist Party, and we're very, very grateful for all that support you've given us. But look, we need to get into office. We need to ensure that we have the full support of the Scottish people in the run-up, not just to the British elections, but also to the Scottish Parliament elections in May of 2016. So look, mate, bear with us, just keep stum, don't get too animated, and once we've been through the May elections of 2016, once we've got our massive majority, maybe even a total unanimous SNP House, then basically we're going to have a clear run, and we can then give you the go-ahead. How does that sound, Mel?
Well, that's exactly what Jim Ratcliffe basically said happened, and that's been widely reported in Scotland. And not only that, Clough Natural Resources have stated that they were told that the Scottish Government is fully behind their proposals for underground coal gasification. They won't put it in the moratorium. So now 15,000 members of the SNP have demanded that the SNP conference in October, they asked for fracking to be outright banned. The SNP leadership dropped that from the agenda against the wishes of the members. Now 15,000 members have demanded UCGs included in the moratorium. As a result, last week Clough said, well, I tell you what, I'm going to wait to get the planning permission until after the Scottish elections, until the political climate is secured. Now, basically what that message is, well, as long as the Scots vote, give the SNP a landslide, then Clough thinks he's guaranteed to get UCG, because the leadership refused to put it in the moratorium because the policy is it's an ignore the scientific evidence-based approach. So Clough, like INEOS, seem perfectly assured that the SNP leadership fully back the plans to basically have a perfect storm in Kincardine on the 1st of 4th of coal bed methane, fracking and underground coal gasification all at the same time.
Right. So what we've got in Scotland is pretty much a one-party state.
Yes.
And I think this has been very, very nicely engineered. Scotland is a one-party state. Now, there's something else that is of deep concern to me, and this is the fact that Glasgow and Edinburgh have also been designated as the experiments for the first smart cities in Europe. Glasgow is now the most surveilled city in Europe, even more so than London. And that surveillance is being managed by a company called NICE. NICE is owned by Police Scotland and Glasgow City Council, and it's underpinned by an Israeli security company. And the reason that they're able to do this in Glasgow and in Edinburgh is because there is massive political euphoria following the landslide of the SNP, and basically people are not scrutinising what's going on in Scotland in the same way as they are in England right now. And in fact, I would say, as of this moment, we have a better chance of getting a political success in shutting down fracking in England than you have in Scotland, despite the fact that Scotland has a moratorium in place right now. Because when Jeremy Corbyn becomes leader of the Labour Party, as he will, unless they fix the elections in the same way they fixed them in Scotland last September, but Jeremy Corbyn will become leader of the Labour Party, and that is going to actually mean that we do have a meaningful opposition. If any one of the other three candidates of the Labour Party, who are basically all Tories in red ties, so if any one of those becomes leader of the Labour Party, basically it's just going to be more of the same, because it's just Tories with blue ties or Tories with red ties. Jeremy Corbyn is going to bring about the opportunity for a very, very real opposition, and that's an opposition that Scotland doesn't have. So the community groups are going to become absolutely crucial, because it's very clear that Nicola Sturgeon and the other senior Scottish National Party members are very much beholden to the likes of Jim Ratcliffe and Algie Clough. And what these guys are promising, these politicians will literally sell their grandmother if they have to.
Well, basically what you've got is the SNP Parliament is working with the Westminster Parliament in an attempt to roll this out. And worse than that, Nicola Sturgeon even did a deal with the Tories before the referendum to transfer control of Scotland's water to Westminster. And most people in Scotland don't even realise that as of the 14th of May 2014, we no longer have water independence, because the SNP entered into a joint objective with the Westminster Parliament to include Scotland's water in a UK-wide private water market, which became Westminster law, not Scottish law, because Nicola personally lodged the paperwork to transfer devolved powers back to David Cameron. But Nicola, when challenged by me about this at a public meeting in my town, said she would answer questions at the end and ran out the hall, white as a sheet, because she knew she had been caught with her pants down and no way to cover her backside. So we have an SNP party who distracted us with a referendum that's doing deals with Westminster Tories over our water, and now they're doing deals over our coal.
So here's the observation to all my friends and colleagues in Scotland. Basically, you've been sold out. You've been sold a pup. You are now living in a one-party state that goes way beyond just the issue of unconventional gas exploitation. We're looking at, as Mel has rightly said, the total loss of water security and the surveillance that's being put in place. They know very well that once the people of Scotland actually understand the magnitude of the sellout by SNP leadership, then there's going to be some pretty serious problems. And what they've got, obviously, is a surveillance system that is literally state-of-the-art. And they're looking to roll it out in Glasgow and Edinburgh first, before rolling out in the rest of the UK.
But basically, what we've got in Scotland effectively is one of the first things the SNP did when they got complete control was to take complete control of all the police forces in Scotland.
Exactly.
So effectively what we've got is a one-party police state.
Exactly. And by the way, it's armed.
Yes, they continually arm themselves illegally. where senior police officers hold secret talks with G4S to shut down control rooms so that G4S can make more profit. Kenny McCaskill refused to name the officers that held the secret talks with G4S. So what we've got is a one-party police state where they're refusing to allow us to have access to our own police stations and surveillance cameras, so that when you have demonstrations like Hands Across the Forth, they can make sure they can photograph every single person using facial recognition, connect that up to Facebook, where the SNP have even given Lockheed Martin's technical chief money to set up 3 data centres in Scotland to gather our internet data. So the SNP are not only taking control of the police, but they've actually set up 3 data centres with an American defence company to gather data over our internet. I mean, what's going on in Scotland, as you say, they use a referendum to distract us. But what party that wants independence from the UK creates a UK-wide private water market with the Tories weeks before the independence vote?
You know,
these people are not who they say they are.
Absolutely, they're not. And you know what? We're often, of course, asked the question, how come the good people of Germany allowed Hitler to rise to power and then establish total control over the population? We're seeing it. We're seeing it in the UK and more so in Scotland. And like I said, I know that there's a lot of people in Scotland who will be going, oh, you know, you're so wrong, you're so wrong. I'm sorry, you have to look at the evidence. We're looking at it dispassionately. You know, we're looking at the evidence. And in fact, I'm going to mention an event that I'm going to be doing in Scotland later in September. In fact, the day after this, because this is an opportunity for people to share their concerns with Scottish Parliament. It's my words, not the words of the campaign. Get the frack out of Scotland. But there's going to be a mass gathering of communities from all over Scotland at Holyrood between 1 and 5 p.m. on Saturday the 26th of September. So if you are concerned about the way in which this agenda is being rolled out in Scotland, and your moratorium, with all due respect, isn't worth any paper that it might be written on. There is no moratorium. Nicola Sturgeon, as we have just discussed, has a deal with Jim Ratcliffe and with Algie Clough to roll this out the moment that the SNP established their massive majority in Holyrood in May of 2016. Basically, the communities across Scotland have now about 9 months to make sure that the people across Scotland understand the magnitude of the deception that's being played out by the SNP here. The SNP have to be held to account. It may be that they are the party that people in Scotland want to have in the ascendancy, but it's also absolutely crucial that at the conference, at the Scottish National Party conference, that the mandate is understood, that if they want to get into office, if they want to retain office, then unconventional gas exploitation has to be completely off the agenda, regardless of what Jim Ratcliffe and Algie Clough are promising. Would you concur with that, Mel?
So I would. I mean, I was a yes voter, a passionate yes voter. And just because people vote yes doesn't mean to say that they support the SNP. But there's lots of people in Scotland who support independence and who don't support independence, who are totally against underground coal gasification, fracking and coal bed methane, especially for Scotland to be used as a guinea pig for the Westminster Parliament.
And the crucial issue is to focus on what we agree on. You know, as you rightly say, Mel, you know, we may differ on many other issues. You know, that's a given. You know, we are human, I hope. You know, we are human. We're going to disagree on things. That's part of the wonderfuls of the polemic. But you know, this issue is so crucial. We have to put aside whatever political, personal, or philosophical differences we have and focus on shutting this down. Because obviously, if we don't, future generations are potentially going to be condemned to absolutely unimaginable abject misery.
I mean, the thing is, Australia 2 years ago, because the trials had been so disastrous, ruled that they will continue a ban on commercial UCG. And the rest of the world is waiting to roll this out. And they're waiting in one country being dishonest enough to claim that this is safe. We have China, Poland, Hungary, India, Australia. Looks like they're likely to ban it. We have got countries across the world waiting in one dishonest country to claim this is safe. And it looks like the SNP are willing to say that Scotland says it's safe. Well, the Scottish people have done their research. We know it causes underground explosions, it causes major subsidence, it contaminates water and farm stock, livestock and farmland for hundreds of kilometres with carcinogenic chemicals. Think Erin Brockovich. That's what underground coal gasification is. It is worse than fracking. They're trying to roll it out. It's not being done anywhere in the world. Why should Scotland be used by the Westminster Parliament? And why on earth are the SNP party allowing Scotland to be used as toxic guinea pigs?
Mel, thank you so much for joining me this evening. I look very much to meeting with you in person. And thank you, by the way, for your efforts in getting this abomination effectively banned from land anywhere in the UK, because the Warwickshire licence was the only land-based licence. At least we've driven them offshore. Now we've got to shut that down. So Mel, thanks very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay. What an amazing lady, and what an inspiration. And I hope that there will be enough people on the Forth Bridge in October to link hands, not just once across, but maybe more times. Meanwhile, a couple of upcoming events just before the closing credits here. Next Monday in Manchester, at Manchester Civil Courts, the hearing where the judge will rule on the contamination of Barton Moss. This is, of course, the case where iGas are accused of having contaminated the well site at Barton Moss with PAHs, polyacrylic aromatic hydrocarbons, nasty stuff, which, of course, they denied. But finally, the independent expert did submit his report, and the judge will make a ruling. So if you're in the area, anywhere near Manchester, then that's next Monday morning outside the Manchester Civil Courts. Hopefully as well, of course, all reporting restrictions will be lifted. Then next Thursday week, a screening of Voices from the Gasfields in York. And of course, Yorkshire has been targeted by this 14th round. So the community groups in Yorkshire are already starting to get around other communities and expand their network. And then on Monday the 14th of September, so that's actually 2 weeks today, a further screening of Voices from the Gasfields in Chester, where my good friend Joe Boyd will be dealing with the question and answers. Joe, a seasoned campaigner, a veteran of Barton Moss and Crawberry Hill, and also studying for his MA in environmental sciences. So if you're anywhere near the Chester area, that's Alexander's Two Rufus Court in Chester on 2 weeks today. And then the event that I talked about in Scotland, I'm not 100% sure of the location yet. It will be somewhere obviously either in Glasgow, Edinburgh, or somewhere between on the M8 there. Fracked, Tracked and Hacked, where I will be joined by Pippa King, who has been absolutely instrumental in fighting the rush to introduce biometrics and RFID in the UK. But despite her successes, what we are seeing in Scotland goes far beyond the pale. And people in Scotland need to understand the magnitude of the surveillance. It makes Big Brother look like kindergarten stuff. Well, more of that will be, or details of that will be available on my website, which is www.ianrcrane.com. Well, once again, my great thanks to Mel Kelly for joining me this evening. An outstanding programme, an outstanding interview. And I am really looking forward to meeting with the campaigners in Scotland as they fight this abomination. Thank you and good night.